This is so great. Well, welcome everyone to the Choose Love Book Club. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we have a really beautiful, special, wonderful guest that we love so much, who's part of the Choose Love movement. In fact, a founding member of Choose High Performance, Allegra Jordan, who's a dear, dear friend of ours and the author of A Splendorful Path, a 500-year peace map in 6 words. And that's what we're all here to talk about. Welcome, Allegra.
Oh, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. Thanks to the 4 of you for inviting me and for sharing this work of my heart with the Choose Love movement. I'm very grateful. Thank you, and thank you for coming. It's a real honor to be part of your group this evening. Thank you.
Well, we are so excited, Allegra, and everyone, this is just a very casual talk. Everyone's read the book. We all have questions. It's a significant work. There's lots of great ideas in here. So please, if you have a question, there's a little button called reactions. You can, there isn't a hand, is there?
Oh, the chat. It's you can just write in the chat if you have a question, or
Sure. You can raise your hand like that.
Raise your hand, too, or that as well.
So either write in the chat if you have a question or raise your hand, but this will be a lively conversation. If you know me, you know if I love a book, that the book is like completely tattered and battered. It's got writing in it. It's got pages turned down. It's highlighted. Things are rewritten on pieces of paper. And so that is this book because I loved it. And so welcome, Allegra. And if it's okay with everybody, I'll just kind of kick us off by my hand's already up. So, I was obviously the first thing that I thought of when I'm looking at this cover is a 500-year peace map in 6 words. And I say that like that because literally right around the corner from where I'm sitting is what I consider to be a peace map in 3 words, which is nurturing, healing, love. And those 3 words have directed my life for the last 8 years. Those were the 3 words that I wanted to get into schools, homes, and communities across the country and across the world. So I loved that you talked about a 500-year peace map in 6 words. And I know that did come from someplace. And, but, I also wrote, can it be that simple? And I thought that when I saw the nurturing, healing, love, like it's so simple. And for me, I said, if the shooter, if Adam Lanza, the shooter in Sandy Hook Elementary, if he'd been able to give and receive nurturing, healing, love, the tragedy would never have happened. I mean, that's pretty simple. And I don't think anybody refutes that. But then when you take a step back, simple isn't always easy. And so I think that's why you open the book to read how those 6 words can lead you to peace.
Scarlett, first of all, it's hilarious. I'm feeling verbose now. 6 words. That's twice what you had. You had just 3 words.
I had 3 words.
I feel like 100% more. I'm going to have to work on my wordiness. I was talking with this wonderful theologian from Notre Dame, Emmanuel Kitangeli, last week, and he is one of the great peacemakers in Africa. And I told him about this book, and he said, 500-year peace map in 6 words. Ha ha ha. He starts laughing, and he says, the one word is love. So he outdid us both. He said the one word is love. And I'm just going to quickly give you a beautiful poem. It's attributed to St. John of the Cross. And if you know anything about his life, he was imprisoned by his own people. So he said we should do things differently. They locked him up in a monastery, or actually in a dungeon, and wrecked his health. But this is attributed to him. Nobody knows exactly if he wrote this in the late 1500s. And I saw the river over which every soul must pass to reach the kingdom of heaven. And the name of that river was suffering. And I saw a boat which carries souls across the river. And the name of that boat was love. And so this great mystic calling to us across the centuries, love, love, love. It's easy to say, hard to do when we're flooded with emotion about the other. And the other could be the other for whatever reason they are. And so we must so carefully practice the choose love formula, because if we do not, we will get snagged and we will become part of that cycle of violence, which continues over and over again unless it's interrupted. This morning, I was watching a comedy, but it was set in Northern Ireland in the 1980s. And you just saw English versus Irish, hate, anger, bombings, soldiers, and within their Protestant versus Catholic. And this will continue again and again unless somebody interrupts that by showing them the better way. And Scarlett, that's why this book is dedicated to all of you with the Choose Love movement, and certainly to Scarlett, because it is only love that is easy to say, hard to do sometimes, that we must practice this with all diligence and ask everybody to practice it with us. Otherwise, we will continue in this cycle. It takes 500 years, and 500 years for many of our societal issues, that's actually pretty optimistic. When you look at Northern Ireland, when you look at Sunni via Shia, when you look at some of these deep divisions, they go thousands of years. And we say, this is the way things have to be. But no, then we have someone like Scarlett who says, no, this is not the way things have to be. Let me show you a better way. Sure. And so that's what we're looking for. And the name of that, the boat there is love. And you all have created these beautiful little skiffs to help send that little fleet of love everywhere it can go, to interrupt this cycle of violence, to give us a chance to have some space between the stimulus of hatred, the stimulus of ignorance, the stimulus of just lashing out because I've been hurt, with the response that we can thoughtfully offer, which is the Choose Love movement.
May I say something?
Please.
Yes.
You bring to mind the experience we had when we went into this last Desert Storm War under the second president. What am I trying to think of? His name escapes me. At any rate, the Secretary of State at the time was Colin Powell. And he did what I know a lot of military people really believe in, and that is don't fight first. And he said, go to the table, talk with France, talk with Germany, don't go to war. And I think he deserves a medal for that, because that really is what we're trying to get done. We're trying to talk before we fight, So I'm really, really pleased that Colin Powell set that example as a retired general. He was very savvy in doing that, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I think when we, and Chip, I know Chip works with the military in Hawaii. He is a force multiplier for good. And I'm so excited that he can take the message of the Choose Love movement into those spaces that many other people can't get into because of Chip's own heart for military service people. And one of the questions is, how do we get here and where do we want to go? And it's easy to be sucker punched into fighting another round. It's very pleasurable. I just learned of a study that anger in the brain can, when you're doing an MRI, it looks like happiness. It hits the same area of the brain that happiness does. And so you get a payoff from anger. Anger is the least socially acceptable emotion that we have. And yet there is this payoff because it registers in the brain as happiness. And so not complete happiness, certainly there's bad things that are going to go with if you're just out of control angry, but there's this little piece that registers happiness. And we have to have in our idea of our consciousness, what is possible? Because if we don't know where we're going, then it's really sometimes pleasurable to get into a fight. And that's why at the beginning of the book, I have a few poems about where people say, where are we going? Because why bother? Like, why not get in the fight? It's kind of delicious. It's really fun to, that person said that to me. Well, yeah, back at you, and how do we interrupt that? How do we think about that? Well, somewhere out there is something beautiful. And three quotes that I offer, because I just love the poetry. The golden city of St. Mary. Out beyond the sunset, could I but find the way, is a sleepy blue laguna which widens to a bay. And there's the blessed city, so the sailors say, the golden city of St. Mary. And it's a very beautiful idea of some place somewhere out there that is so beautiful that would make us put down our fight and say, I'd rather do that than something else. Martin Luther King Jr. said, yes, in 1956, yes, we're going to have this bus boycott. And he did. It was a very famous victory. But he said, ultimately, the end here is reconciliation. The end is redemption. The end is the creation of the beloved community. And the idea is, where is all of this going? So anybody who wants to pick a fight with you, you can just say, okay, what is your vision way out there? Where are you trying to take us? And if their vision is not too good, then you can say, can I share with you a different way? It's beloved community. It's a city of reconciliation, the beloved city of St. Mary. Whatever this view of wholeness is. And what I love about the Choose Love movement is that the vision of wholeness is just so nicely summed up with, if you behave this way, good things can happen. It doesn't mean that you're going to get out of the human condition. You'll still have suffering. You'll still have challenges, but there's something beautiful about this path. And if you take this, it's just the best path that we have. It's sometimes a very narrow path. But that's why I think that that's why I wanted to include this St. John of the Cross poem in here, because he says we do have suffering, and there's this little boat that we have to use in order to get where we want to go. Otherwise, we'll just get sucker punched into fights. And after this, I'm going to be at a church discussion. Miss Kristen Lewis has joined us today, and she leads this wonderful reconciliation group at a church. And I must always practice my skills of listening, because it's so easy to say, oh, I wrote a book about that. Let me tell you about who I am. And forgiveness, that is one of the most exquisite elements of the Choose Love movement. It is so rare to find in any social movement the word forgiveness. And it's so easy to say and so hard to do when it's our own forgiveness. Now, if I'm talking about someone else's forgiveness, it's hard. It's easy for me to say that, but when they're talking about me, oh, now you're meddling. And so it's like, oh, you're meddling in my business now.
And I might add that forgiveness is generally kids' favorite character value, which blows me away. When I ask them, which character value do you use the most? They say, forgiveness. And I say every time, why? Really? And they say, because it feels so good to let it go. It's a superpower. Wow. And these are little kids. Can you imagine the trajectory of their life and the quality of their relationships with that ability to forgive? Wow.
And you ask them, what does it mean to forgive? And they start hugging each other.
Yes.
So
They
cute.
know.
Yeah.
They do know. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah. So the beloved community is, I love those two words, and I love the concept of the beloved community. In the Choose Love movement, our vision is a lifespan of the ability to choose love, just for people to know that it's a choice, and to have the skills and tools so they can make that choice. And this concept of the beloved community, I had never heard of those words before, but I was going to read about, you have a write-up of what Martin Luther King called it somewhere. I know, I just read it.
I think it's right.
Oh, it's on page 5.
Oh, it's on page 5.
Was that from page 15 too?
Yes, you're right. Thank you. I was already. The end, Dr. King said in a 1956 speech that the goal of his work was to help people experience what is possible when we work together. King said, the end is reconciliation. The end is redemption. The end is the creation of the beloved community. It is this type of spirit and this type of love that can transform opponents into friends. It is this type of understanding goodwill that will transform the deep gloom of the old age into the exuberant gladness of the new age. It is this love which will bring about miracles in the hearts of men. Ah,
Beautiful, beautifully said.
and it's possible. It's experience what is possible. This is possible even today, because it comes down to the choices that we make as individuals.
Absolutely. And one of those choices is, I didn't include the very beginning of this paragraph in the book, but he starts out the paragraph by saying, we have an opportunity to inject love in the veins of humanity.
Mm.
And so every time somebody ticks me off, or I think it's like, oh, wait, I have an opportunity to inject love into the veins of humanity. And how about if I take that opportunity? Because if I don't, I will actually be modeling by example that it's okay to fight back. And so I always have to think in my head, where am I going? And in the book, we have beloved community. This is the model community where we can use our words. We will have differences, but at least you'll use your words to express differences, and you'll be able to detoxify by using the Choose Love formula. But you also have examples of what a flourishing human being is. And when I started working with the military, I was thinking, what if they didn't really use the word flourishing when I started working with them, but when we talked about green flags, grab as many green flags as you can get. And the green flags of a flourishing human, that's a standard created through time about what a flourishing human is. And that includes a sense of self, a purpose greater than your own self-interest, a circle of healthy relationships. Well, you can't have a healthy relationship unless you have courage, gratitude, forgiveness, and compassion in action, because those friendships will fail. Belonging to a healthy community, the ability to act on your impulses, social and emotional intelligence, full deployment of your gifts. Like if you're just kind of hoarding your gifts and not sharing them, that's not a flourishing human being. Resilience, and also a capacity for joy. And one of the neat things that I love about the playfulness of the Choose Love movement, and why I think it's so important, is because there's a sense of joy. It was founded by Jesse, and Jesse loved ducks. And so here I have this, how can you be a grump when you have this on your jacket, or I have one of those ducks around? Rumi, the great Sufi poet, says, this is not a caravan of despair. And I think that's said on his tombstone. It's at least apocryphally. That's what I've heard on his tombstone. We're not inviting you to a caravan of despair. And Scarlett and the entire Choose Love movement do not invite anybody to a caravan of despair. You invite us to a place of joy and an opportunity and miracles. The miracles in the hearts of kids, that they're solving their own problems. And let's just not get in the way of kids being able to solve their own problems and practice that, because again, I worked in the reconciliation movement. I wrote this book, and just last week, I nearly tripped on my own self. I mean, it's like you have to really watch out and do your steps each time. You don't get any free passes. You have to, live by your words.
Yeah. And I literally wrote, everybody can see, right, in what you just read through, I literally wrote, Choose Love, what we teach.
Yeah, you teach people to flourish, but you do it in such an accessible way that, as I remember being in a meeting, and I think Senator Blumenthal was here for the Choose Love movement, the Connecticut senator, who really loves this movement. And he said, my life's been kind of hard lately, but he broke out into this great smile when he talked about the Choose Love movement. He said, it's fun, it's what works, and let's have more of that. And I also love, I mentioned Senator Blumenthal, but one of the things that I love about the Choose Love movement is that it is bipartisan. There is people on both sides of the American aisle love it, but if you were to go take this to the Sunni and Shia or Northern and Southern Ireland, you'd find people on both sides of that loving it as well. So it's these are universally lovely things that help us flourish no matter what story you've been pulled into.
Mm. Oh, it's beautiful, Allegra. If I could just add something, one part of the book that I was trying to find if I couldn't, when you're talking about suffering, that of course we experience suffering, but we also experience joy, and it's about like half and half. But are we going to spend our time in suffering and, miss out on those joys that we can experience during the suffering? Or are we just going to stay in the suffering? And the importance of play and going back to your childhood and how you did that at Rick's place, I think is so powerful. What we're trying to cultivate, choose love, and in schools, but then also in homes and communities and businesses now. I just think that's so powerful. And I love that you pulled a whole part on that and was focusing on that playful nature.
Oh, thank you. Well, Alexis and Pam, I've had the privilege to walk with them. They've had suffering in their life these past few months, the loss of Pam's father and mother. She was very close to them. She loved them, and they've passed on. And this is, you're with the Choose Love movement, and you have this beautiful radiance tonight about you, and yet you've clearly suffered, but you're not embittered by it. And it doesn't mean that it's not a choice every hour. But one of the things that I've been taken by is when I had a friend, I write about him in the book, who was murdered. And when I look at his parents, they don't look like Scarlett. They look aged and angry. They look bitter. And they were never able to get over the murder of their child. And I thought that was normal. I did, until I realized that that's a choice, actually. Now, it's very painful. Again, I want to be very respectful of a person who's lost their child. But Scarlett has modeled to me that you can have great suffering, and it doesn't mean that you don't have incredibly painful suffering, but you also have these 10,000 joys. Every life has 10,000 sorrows and 10,000 joys, and we can live there. One of the key elements, there's not, I was listening to Dr. Ray Barfield. He's a pediatric palliative care doctor. So he's a hematologist, and most times, every week, he does have to tell about, he says 1 to 2 to sometimes 3 children that they're in the last chapter of their life. And he's done it for 30 years, and he doesn't burn out. And that's just a very, it's hard to get your head around how he does that. But when someone asked him, and I was in the audience when someone asked him, Dr. Ray, what is suffering to you? And so he's like, that's a really good question. Like, we don't actually define what suffering is. And so I'll read to you this sonnet that I wrote, but I just took dictation from Dr. Ray. I sent him the poem, and he said, oh, I'm pretty smart. I think I'll need to put that in my pocket to remember what I said. So this is his definition of suffering, and he's somebody who really knows what he's talking about. Suffering, I'm not okay, has seasons. From time to time, we're summoned to confront a new lack of wholeness that comes for reasons we may or may not deserve. The affront will confront the me I was, grow or die. And I must meet the new, unfinished me that I am now. Truths that once would fortify my soul have vanished. I'm an amputee, in agony, alone, and not okay. Yet only now can reintegration be possible. As I ricochet between loss and hope, a new creation is born. It's hard. As I walk these days of wrath, may love and grace and angels guide my path. And for so many of you, you are those angels. I'm not talking about, yes, there may be spiritual angels, but I believe angels are messengers, heavenly messengers, and your hands and feet are those hands and feet, and emails and texts. Thank you. Stacey. Oh, sorry, Alexis.
No, I just had a quick thing that I wanted you to address. First off, I love your book. I mean, it's so the way it's put together. I mean, you'll have like such insight, and then all of a sudden you drop a poem in there and you're like, whoa, this Allegra wrote this, and it just really reverberates to what you're saying, the message, the cadence of the words and the feelings and the emotions carry on. Scarlett talks a lot about everybody, most people have a negative bias. I mean, we're always thinking the negative. We're always, glass, is always half empty. It's not full. And we always see the darker side. And you start off with how people are seeing, some of the poetry that we see out there is dark. If you read Emily Dickinson's some of the ones she has that she's seeing the bird walk in the, you see nature, she's saying it's really, there's death in there. So there's a lot of those types of images around. How do you address that, where how people always are just so negative all the time and have a hard time, like you said, finding that playtime, finding those micro moments of joy, like Scarlett says, to try to be more positive, where Scarlett lost her son and I said she models it for others and can have that radiance, that positivity, but she also has the grief in her. We all will have, like, even losing my parents, I'll always have that grief. I might look okay today and I might feel okay, but tomorrow it might just, I might be just dragged down. Why do you feel people have that negative side to us all the time, where we can't just be that more positive than negative side?
Well, Pam, you raise a good issue. And there are some parts of our society that are profoundly stuck. And they just share the dark stories. They just share, ain't it awful? There's a passage in the book about they're going, a blues singer from Alabama, and she talks about going from moaning, ain't it awful, to mourning, M-O-R-N-I-N-G. So you have to, you can say what's wrong, but it's important to lament in society, to say, because that's where your tears become activism. That's where you say enough is enough. And when I was talking with Father Emmanuel Kitangeli last week, he was on a church discussion, and the church person said, okay, we've had 3 international guests about peace and reconciliation, and you all have said we have to lament, which is, and he said, yeah, he goes, so this guy's like, I'm an American, I'm getting the message here, we need to lament. And he said, I'm getting it in stereo. But Emmanuel said, that's where we come together as a community and say, enough is enough. And only then do we move into activism. How can we, and when we move into activism, we need to know what good tools are. We need to know to choose love. We need to know where we're going. But there are many societies, many individuals who, change is hard. And it's so much easier to say, ain't it awful? And just spin around in that ain't it awful. And I grew up in a community like that. And I thought that's the way the world had to be. And then I moved to a different community and I was like, oh, wait, you can change things. The world is not so broken that a person with courage can't change things. And Scarlett just said, change takes courage and it takes some energy. And you might embarrass yourself. You might be told, we don't like you, get out, because you want to change and and that threatens me. And so a lot of, we give these beautiful opportunities to so many people. And how many times have we heard Scarlett say, I have worn myself to the bone. She never says that, but it's like, I've just done so much. And these people, they don't take action. They don't see that so many people's lives could be changed. We could have fewer deaths. We could have so many good things, but they don't take action. Don't they see the urgency of it? And they haven't really lamented enough. They have not gotten to the point is enough is enough. Mm-hmm. And so that is, and so when I do hear people, I always give people a few minutes with the ain't it awful piece, because you do need to figure out, okay, well, what in there needs to change. But if you have 2 or 3 conversations with them and they're still spinning their wheels about ain't it awful, then you're like, I think this might be a lifestyle for them. Mm-hmm. If it's a lifestyle from them that they're comfortable with, until they're ready to change, they will not. Mm-hmm. It has been my experience. Now, I don't want to be a victim of hey, maybe Allegra, if you tried a little bit harder. Okay, so I don't want to give up too quickly, because maybe there's more in my control than I realize. But I also realize that some people, it's a lifestyle to complain and to not do anything else about it. But so I think that we have to be, it's an art, not a science, knowing when to go to the next person who might actually then be part of the change.
I think there's another piece to this also. In my experience, what I run into with the grief work that I do is oftentimes people have the tool in their hands because I put it in their hands,
Mm,
and they won't use the tool.
mm,
And it's like any other toolbox. If you close the lid on it and you never open it up, you're going to stay right where you are.
Yeah.
And if nothing changes, nothing changes. And I think as people who love each other, we need to be able to step back and maybe even asking a parting question. How long do you want to stay in your misery?
Yeah. Mm.
I had
I
a
think
great,
that-
okay.
No, I'd say, I think that's the complacency feeling that people just are complacent and just either they're afraid, like you said, they don't have the courage, or they just feel like, oh, this is kind of working for
This is how it
me,
is,
and they
this is
don't
how it
want to
has- or
change.
This is how it has to
Yeah.
be, you know, it
Yeah.
takes, like I said, it takes a strong, courageous.
Even
person.
society, we see it now with all like the social unrest. We kind of, go along with it until something happens, another shooting happens,
Yeah,
then we
say
take
enough's
action
enough.
because,
Yeah.
oh, something's happened now.
Yeah.
I think that's what we
yeah.
don't open our eyes enough sometimes and realize we can change. We need to change. We need to talk or
Yeah,
act.
that's a good point with like the lament, like being almost stuck in there and not getting through it to the next stage in the pathway.
Yes,
Stacy, you had a question?
I was going to circle back to a couple of points that Allegra was making. I think what you guys are tying in now also speaks to her. If you get to tears, then maybe you can get to activism. You have to really feel, when the pendulum swings, unless you really get out there in your uncomfortable zone, which is what Scarlett teaches us, where you're really going to grow, you have to have the courage to be able to make the moves to swing out a little further. And then maybe you can level off back, to a central point. But it takes work. That's not easy. And it takes advocacy as well, and leadership. And, when I ask myself, like I was interested in what were the 6 words that Allegra was going to come to, that speak to the main message. And I found that really interesting. So I guess that's a question I have for you, Allegra, is even though Scarlett was able to narrow it down to 3 in a different format, which I never really see her as very competitive, but I thought that was amusing in the beginning, ladies, just saying. But so, how did you come to that? And then also reading like the MLK piece, like he kind of put out also a series of words that were why bother, lament, hope, lead, and persevere, which are leadership words, at their core. And why bother is really what needs to change, right? I mean, that's kind of the big message there. So I was, if you could speak to that a little bit, Allegra, I think there's a lot of insight in your messages.
Well, thank you, Stacy. And I'd like to all, for those who do not know Stacy, she's an amazing change maker in New York. And not only is she a great change maker, but she's got a great business head. And so, Stacy, just to let you know, you and Chip kind of have some of the same ideas. I hope that you guys as ambassadors get together to think about your business perspectives. But I think that what you're talking about is, it was when I boiled things down to 6 words, I was actually taught these 6 words by some people who showed me what not stuck look like. There are some people that I've learned from in different places. Scarlett's one of them. But there are some people in Africa that were very generous in teaching me, Kato Bumushabaku of the Congo, where somebody wrote a book called Dancing in the Company of Monsters about Congo. Said there's nothing good about Congo. It is a horror show. Write it off. And yet, Kato one time stayed at my house, and he's this amazing person like Scarlett. He doesn't look like he's been through profound grief. He has been. Horrific grief. You can read about it in Dancing in the Company of Monsters. But here he is on the other side of it with this beautiful glow about him. And he and others came up with this pattern. And they said, you really have to know why you're bothering. And in the way they would narrate why you're bothering is, what's the telos? What's the end game that you're going to? What is this beautiful city, this place that you're going to? Because that's got to be so beautiful that it's going to help you when you say enough is enough. Okay, well, what do I do? Am I going to repay violence with violence? Am I going to become bitter? Am I going to lash out? Am I, if that's what you're doing, then you're just replacing one broken system with another broken system. And that actually hurts our children worse, because they'll say, hey, you were, let's say if this was, Protestant versus Catholic. Okay, well, the Catholics did this to us, and now the Protestants do it. So they're just all bad. Well, what about replacing both system in Northern Ireland with a humane system with dignity? And we have to really be very careful about it, because it's so delicious to punch back when we're punched. And so these great leaders, Scarlett being one of them, these great African leaders who were teaching me as well, showed me that this is the path that you have to know. And the most important parts of the path are where are you going? When, what's your energy source? When's enough is enough? And then how do you narrate hope? Because there's a lot of fake hope out there. And in the how do we stop school violence? How many fake ideas are out there? There are a number of things that are really, that there's a reason why the Department of Homeland Security says we love, choose love. And it's because you get at the root cause. But in Africa, the solution is a well, the solution is a World Bank loan. Well, no, it's not. The solution is to see the dignity of every person, even if they're not from your particular ethnic background or your religion. So thank you, Stacy. That's a great question. And also, I'd like just to offer that in Stacy's son has special needs. He's a wonderful kid. And part of how I learned this path was to say, let's get out of any type of political or ethnic discussion, and let's talk about people with special needs. What is the world like? What is the beloved community like for a person with special needs? And I learned so much from sitting with people with special needs, both here and in Africa. And the amazing thing would be just, well, my version of heaven, if I'm in a wheelchair, is not that there are that I'm made differently. It's that there are no steps that create a lack of dignity. I am made the way I am made. In their version, it would be in the image of God, and I'm a beautiful creature, however my body or brain came out. And so what heaven is to me, this beautiful community, is to remove the barriers that remove my dignity. And and when you start there where health is the issue, then you can get into other places where maybe a political difference or a difference based on something else comes in.
That's so interesting. Let's go to the 6 words.
Okay.
The 6-word peace path. We've talked a little bit about why bother, and we've talked a little bit about lament because it fuels our desire. We talked a little bit about hope. I think hope is really important. I just wanted to say that, I always say that school shootings are 100% preventable. I've never, ever heard anyone else say that. And then one day, Michelle Gay, who is also a Sandy Hook mom, who runs Safe and Sound Schools, it's the top school safety organization. She said, Scarlett, you're going to want to hear this woman speak. And it was Molly Hudgens. She wrote a book called Saving Sycamore. She actually disarmed a student who came in with a loaded gun ready to do mass murder herself, single-handedly, through prayer. It was an incredible, but anyway, she was talking and she was right. I was just spellbound listening to her. And she said, every school shooting is 100% preventable. And I was like, oh, what? Nobody else has ever said that. And she says, with one word. And so I'm sitting on the edge of my seat. I'm like, I know what the word is. It's love, it's love, it's love. And she says, with hope. And I thought, whoa, okay, you know what? She's right. She's right. Because when you have no hope, who cares? And I see so much hopelessness out there. And so you need hope to be able to go on. And how could you have hope if you didn't know that you could choose love?
Well, Scarlett, I think that you're, and the movement, and everybody here who's followed that path. And while I'm singling you out, you're an exemplar. Everybody on this call has examples of how they have experienced this and how they have narrated hope in the face of what other people would call craziness. Other people might say, that's nuts. I'm sure nobody's called you nuts ever, Scarlett, I'm sure. And so, but what we do is, I like how Dr. Kato Bungashabaku of Congo says that hope is not magical, it's not naive, or it's not magical optimism. It requires courage to see a vision beyond what seems possible, to grasp that vision for something better, and to live with it. And that is really beautiful. That is at Harvard Business School, we were told hope was defined by different companies, high return on investment. At one point, a makeup company was told, we don't sell makeup, we sell hope. It's lipstick. And I always thought, isn't that a very flimsy idea of hope? It's like, okay, I'm facing the murder of my beloved friend, and lipstick is not going to get me out of it. I'm just sorry. And so how do we give people very rich ideas of hope? And it can't be based on this. This is not birth control. This is not a plan. This is just crossed fingers. That's optimism. And it's very flimsy when things get really bad. And so I think about stories that we share that have to be very carefully curated. Otherwise, we will be telling people that hope is lipstick. And a nice spa day is wonderful. It rejuvenates me. I'm all for a nice spa day, but that is not hope for our children. What hope for our children is that life can be better. The story that we're in is not the way things have to be. And even though we had shootings this week, last week, we have so many shootings, even though we have them, we have this sense that if we keep working at it, we can replace what we have with something more beautiful and more loving that will help our society flourish. But hope, when I was looking up the word hope, you keep coming up as Alexis mentioned, no, as Pam mentioned about Emily Dickinson. And she very famously says, hope is a thing with wings. And I'm like, could you be a little bit more concrete here? Emily Dickinson is one of the world's great poets. I'm never going to, never in her realm, but it's very hard to pin down what hope is. And so trying to say, that it is beyond optimism, it is a sense that that there's something beautiful out there, even though we're not there yet. And where can we, in fact, I was just on a different call and I shared the story, Scarlett, of you in the firehouse where you're listening to the news of the Sandy Hook shooting and you're there and you know that you can fall apart. And I have no doubt, well, now that I know you, I might not fall apart, but I think I would have fallen apart. And you said, I have a vision of my son who is standing beside me, and I want that vision of my son to see how an adult has an opportunity to handle just the worst news ever. And that even though what we would characterize that maybe as leadership or as self-care, I saw that as hope, because you said there's something out there and I want my son to be able to reach it. And I know that I'm going to have to act in a certain way so that JT gets there. And to me, that is hope embodied.
One quick thing on that I love that I highlighted was you wrote hope is a sense that even though it's night, I'm moving in the right direction. And I love that it's on page 32. I love the idea of the movement of it, that, hope is not just like, oh, this lofty thing, like you said, like some optimism, that's something you're moving toward, that it's like an ongoing process. It's not just like a one and done. And it's more powerful than that. It's literally putting on the trajectory that you're going through a lot. It's a dark time. It's a hard time. You can get out of it. And that's how I've experienced everything in my life. And I'm known as an optimist. And, talk to people in different parts of life and think it's like, how do you stay like that? How do you, stay happy? And of course we all have our low moments, but I think I always have that in my mind. I love that movement that we're going there, even through this pandemic. And everyone says, "Oh, light at the end of the tunnel," and it's true. I mean, we're going to get through it. You know, we always will. You know, and the world still spins. You know, it keeps on spinning.
I think it gives you that
Yeah,
that goal, you know, there's
yeah.
an attainable goal that you're striving for. If it's always just like every time you think of something or do something, you get it. It's like, okay, I got it
Yeah,
or whatever.
it's
But I
like-
think it's that hope is where there is that beauty, there is that achievable goal, and you work for it. You keep working and
This-
working, and,
yeah.
and it's there. It is there. But if it came too easy to you, you just wouldn't.
And I like the idea that you have to keep on doing it. You have
Yeah.
to keep on practicing, just like our Choose Love movement. Like it's not like, oh, if I chose love today, I'm done.
think
I had
there's
hope.
a-
I'm
I did a
done.
kind deed today,
Yeah,
and I'm
I'm
done
done.
with it. I don't
Yeah,
have to
it's-
do it. Yeah, I think
It's a way of life.
Yeah.
There's another word for this too that I like, and it came from, I think the first time I heard it was Wayne Dyer spoke it, which is, it's a knowing.
Mm.
I'm going through a process right now with something I'm trying to do where there's a knowing in me. It won't let me give up because I know that I know beyond the shadow of a doubt, this thing is going to cook one way or the other. I just don't know what the road is right now, but I'm very vigilant. And it's that knowing, like the embodiment that Allegra's talking about, you just know in your bones, it's going to go. It's going to go. And you keep believing.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's good.
I think that it's also important to there's a concept of control,
Mm.
and stressors are things outside of us over which we have no control. I think it's really important in order to feel hope to have an inner locus of control, to have to be able to know that you can choose how you respond. I think that's really important. I love what you wrote about it, Allegra. Hope is a sense that one can be restored to a set of relationships we call home, spiritual, emotional, physical, though it may not mean a biological family. It's an inner sense and one that when it is real, the world can't give or take away. Kind of what Cliff said. It's a knowing, it's an absolute.
Yeah, one of the things, and thank you for reminding me how smart I was a few months ago. Like, but one of the things that I think makes me really anxious, maybe you too, is this external versus internal sense of knowing. And so if I'm worried about getting your approval, or if I'm worried that you're going to take something from me, then I'm really going to be walking on eggshells. I'm not going to have that inner sense of peace, which creates the glow, the real beauty in a number of people that we meet who do have this sense of hope. And so whenever I find myself really edgy or feeling mobilized, my chest, my face, just getting a little stressed out, I then step back and say, okay, I think there's a symbol here. Maybe I am looking for external validation versus the knowing that Chip talked about. And if I act from knowing, I'm going to I'm going to just be able to perform better. I'm going to, or perform actually even sounds like a performance. I'm going to actually be in this world better, more effective. Whereas if I'm worried about external validation, that is, that's going to be pretty rickety. And that's where we see a number of people get derailed through maybe eating disorders or body dysmorphia or, other elements, because they're trying to please something out there. We can't please something out there. We can, it just is not a long-term strategy. And that's when, if you're trying to please someone outside, that really kind of goes away as soon as things get hard. And once things get hard, you have to say, okay, I'm doing this because I know, or you know what, nice try.
The word confidence comes up with knowing for me as you speak, Allegra. There's a sense of confidence that comes out of the knowing that you don't have to know that that you're going to get through the dark. I mean, that you don't know how to get through the dark, but you know you're going to get through it. It's kind of like somebody who's in a gas chamber and they know there's a way out. They just haven't found it yet, but they know they're going to get out of that, or a fire, or whatever it might be. There's just a knowing that they're going to go there, and the courage comes up to continue to pursue it.
I think that it's so important, Chip, to share these stories with people. I've written, at this point, I've written 4 little books, and one of them's not so little, but all of this is because I want us to be able to share stories with each other. When I'm not here, you can pick up a story. If Scarlett's not there to talk, you can read her book. It's so important that we share these stories, because look at the violence we're drenched in. If you turn on many different, even commercials, you know, that you're seeing us monetize the violence of society. I'm gonna, you know, shoot someone, or there's just so many. We're just so drenched in violence. How do we create this counter narrative if it's not one-to-one sharing? Hey, you know what? You thought you couldn't do it, but you could do it. And that to me is one of the reasons why I write, because we don't have we have some stories, but these stories have to be told and practiced, lived out, encouraged, so that the wisdom in this generation is changes this next generation. It alchemizes us, but also so that people, even in our own circle, don't look at the TV or media and say, okay, life is about bang, bang, shoot 'em up. And they're already awash in that steady diet. So how do we give people these different examples, confidence, hope? It's through what you're doing as ambassadors, as members of the Choose Love movement. It's to say it's absolutely vital is an understatement, because if not, look at the alternative of the steady diet of stories that that people have a choice to imbibe.
That brings us right into leadership. And I just want to say that when I started my traveling, so for 7 years, I traveled so much, crisscrossing the United States and internationally, looking for people. I thought when I started this movement that I would just have to create the best of the best and offer it for free, and that would be it. And what I realized was I had to cultivate the courage in leaders to do something that was a little bit different. And like I said, the first year I only found 4, and they were in different states. One of them was Jamie Dela Cruz in Hawaii, that would take my program and try it. And I think that what I realized, and I didn't look for it, is that we do have a lack of courage in leadership, and that's something that we can teach.
It's so disappointing when some people have the opportunity to do the right thing and don't do it. Oh, it's just, it's, and
Right.
yet we have some other people who have so little money, so little anything, and yet they do this great act of beautiful courage. And it's just mind-boggling. And all I can say about that is, thank you. Thank you so much for when you had 4 people, only 4 people said yes, you kept on. And I mean, it almost brings tears to my eyes and raises the hair on my arms. What if you had stopped? What if you had prematurely said, I declare failure? 2 million people who have experienced this would not have experienced it. So this book is as much a love letter to you, Scarlett, as and everybody in the movement. It's not, one person does not make a movement, but Scarlett, when my friend got killed, I was for 17 years surrounded by people who said, okay, your life's over. And then I met you and you were like, oh, I looked at it differently. I was like, oh, I could have gotten 17 years of my life back. And so we can go to kids and not have them lose that 17 years because they can see a better way, a different way, and a very accessible way. And so Stacy, you have your hand up.
Isn't there a beautiful picture of Scarlett next to your word number 6, which is persevere? I mean, that just circles right back to, let's look at the words. I was going to comment on the leadership piece, and I really liked your comment in your book about if life hasn't given you lemons yet, it will. And, when my son was diagnosed with autism, just after 2, I wasn't quite sure, sorry. I didn't really know what the word autism meant. And we went to a neurologist and got a diagnosis. And 5 days later, there were 9 people meeting in my living room, making a plan. And then I became a micromanager of the team. And everything was so hypersensitive around his challenges and what he can't do. And it was only until I got to the therapists that were able to really teach me that we need to also focus on what he can do and do more with that and grow those strengths. And hearing from Temple Grandin in time talks a lot about that. If you're not familiar with her, look her up. She's brilliant and teaches, you know, build your portfolio. What are you putting in it? Where are your strengths? And keep going with that. And I think that's a really important message. Eric actually loves to say problem solution, which is exactly what you write about, Allegra, where you talk about your right and your left hand. And when you put them together, you're going to find your solution. Like, you're it. You have to find the essence of your solution. And that speaks to, like Chip said, the confidence and the hope and the, you know, like the optimism that Alexis talks about, to be able to continue to play and take the next action step, whatever it may be for your situation. So I really like that part. I think that that's a big force, you know, and message to keep, you know, the movement going, right? And here, you know, we are a movement collectively within the Choose Love group, and how to keep it moving and keep it spreading is the essence of what we're trying to do.
I want to, while you're talking, it reminded me about something that I heard recently, which was, imagine you're at the beginning of your life. Your body does not have its soul in, and you're talking about what this life is going to be for you. And maybe you're talking about it with elders, you're talking about it with whatever religious figures you have, but you're making an agreement. Okay, this soul is going to get into this body. What are we going to do? What was the purpose of this lifetime to do? And are you going to leave the body not having done that purpose? So to me, whether or not it's true, whether or not things work out that way, I don't know. But I think that's an interesting question, because instead of me being bogged down by the, I can't do this or I can't do that, suddenly the table is turned. It's like, okay, what deal did I make with whatever is out there in order, and what needs to be accomplished with this lifetime? And am I doing it? Or at the end of it, will I say, oh, you know what? I really ducked all that stuff. It's been a way that I've kind of been thinking about things recently, and it's given me a lot more courage about what do I need to do. And why did Scarlett choose such a hard life? Why did she choose a hard life? Am I skating by? Did I choose an easy life? I don't know.
I question that, because I would never have chosen this. So
yeah. So it's certainly not to think that you would, but
no, I know.
But yeah, it engaged with you, and you embraced the tears and the lament, and you are showing us a better way.
I think too, like you said, you have to, in the book there, when you're talking about the stonemason, where you have to find that fire in you, you have to continuously do that. I think that goes along with hope and confidence. You have the hope that something's going on, and the fire and the you know, the burning need inside you that says, hey, there is something, I can work towards it. Scarlett didn't get, you know, I mean, yeah, she had a lot of some naysayers, but she didn't stop. She found that fire within her, that you know, Jesse's courage was going through her veins and blood, and saying, I can do this, I'm going to do this. And I think that's what you need to always refresh yourself to, saying, why am I here? What can I accomplish? What do I want to accomplish in my life? Or else what is your life going to be worth in the end?
No, I love that. And then I remember, just quick aside, I remember first meeting, we're talking with Scarlett when I first was coming on board to work with the Choose Love movement, and her saying, she's like, what more important job can you have than being in service to others? And then she says a lot, but I just remember the first time she said it to me, and it really like awoke in me. It's like, yes, like this is what I've been looking for. It's just like, I know, like I want to be in service to others. And she like kind of validated that, because you don't always hear that when you're in school and you're in college, you know, it's like, oh, make money, get a good job, you know, you go on the conveyor belt and all that. And I've always been, you know, very anti-conveyor belt. And but to see someone like Scarlett who started this movement saying there is another way, you know, this can be a way of life. And of course she had to go, you know, into a tragedy to get here, but it's so empowering to show that what do you want your life to mean? And oh, this just totally talks to my soul.
And
so.
keep stoking
Yeah,
it.
it's
And
like-
as
and
each
every day,
person
yeah.
saved, or we, you know, we touch people's lives, or we see these stories, that's what's keeping us, you know, the passion
Yeah.
going in us.
Another thing I wrote down was, and I highlight somewhere, pain and purpose, you know, like through your pain, you find your purpose.
Mm.
And I think that's something that, you know, you hit upon throughout the book, and that we all experience it, but that's how we find out why we're here.
I wish we didn't have to have the pain. I
know.
wish there were an easier way than
Me
getting hit in
too.
the head with a brick, you know?
Yeah, I
Cliff
think
has his
one of
hand
the
up.
things that stood out for me is this issue about leaders that don't take action. I co-authored a college course called Leadership with Integrity, and we built it on 3 sort of legs of a milking stool. And one of those legs was intimacy. And the second one was trust, and the third was ethics.
Mm.
And so we were challenging college students to think, as young leaders, these people were returning to college from jobs they had 8-9 hours a day to come to college at night.
Mm.
And we were challenging them to say, look, you have to think about what is important to you internally, the into me see that you're passionate about, exactly like you're talking about. And if you believe in this, whatever it is, you need to stand up for it, because it's not ethical not to stand up for it. You've been given this insight, concept, and idea to move it forward in the world. And if you shrink from it, you're part of the problem. So I get to Hawaii. I'm 2 years in the job. One of my students who moved down here ahead of me called me and said, "Hey, sit down." I said, "Why?" She said, "I just resigned my job." I said, "You what?" She said, "I just resigned my job." And she had been in one of those classes that we taught for leadership with integrity. I said, "What happened?" She said, "The guy that owns the company, the chief executive officer, came to me as his financial person and told me he wanted me to cook the books, and it involved doing it on a federal government grant or loan that we'd been given." And I handed him his keys and said, "I'll be out of my office in 15 minutes. It didn't take her very long, because she knew that it was her responsibility to step up ethically and say no. And she was out of the building in 20 minutes.
Wow.
And that's the kind of stuff that I think that Scarlett's talking about. We need to fan the flames with leaders. We need to say there's a hell of a lot of tools out there that can make you a better leader. You don't have the right to sit on your laurels and not do a better job. Excuse me. And oh, by the way, we're not going to keep rewarding you with a high paycheck either, if you can't get it figured out.
That's a really good point, Cliff. And I know that it's based in fear. It's based in fear, and they need courage to get through that. And that's amazing. You know, I never actually, going back to what Alexis was saying, I never thought that you could do something for a living, a job that wasn't a decision that wasn't made out of fear. And after Jesse's murder, I look back and I saw every relationship I'd ever been in, every job I'd ever taken was all out of fear. And I made a commitment to myself that going forward, I'm going to make my decisions based in love. And this is where it's led me. And it's a good thing.
A real good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so inspiring. There is this woman in Africa, Maggie Barankisi, who said, "Love made me an inventor." And so she's had to invent so many different things. And Scarlett, love has made you an inventor.
Mhm.
And everybody here, we're all inventing the future. And we wouldn't be here without that. Another woman in Africa said, is a midwife. And she goes, "I'm a midwife to peace." And even Chip is a midwife to peace, even though he's a male. And so we are in this beautiful space. We are so lucky to have found each other, because how many years did we not have each other to rehearse the steps that we need to rehearse, to share the stories that we need to share, that can really uplift the darkest places. And so it's very beautiful. It's been an honor to be here tonight. But in part, it was an honor to know about what you all do, because that inspired this work. Last summer, I said, I cannot sit by in civil unrest and not do something. And this is what I did. And so I thank you for honoring it with a visit tonight, and with the stories that are imbued through here, because they are me sharing your stories, hopefully with a wider audience.
Well, it's a beautiful, beautiful book. I actually praised it by saying a love letter everyone should read. And I believe that. I did want to just give a little shout out to Anna, because Anna's been with us every single book club. Hi. And I wanted to know if you had a question or you wanted to make a comment, not to put you on the spot, but just because you usually do.
I just want to tell the Allegra that when I read your book, it was powerful in the fact that you had the vision for 500 years, and that every 100 years we would check in. And I think of the indigenous people, it's for what they do now, it's for 7 generations. And I also wanted to thank you tonight about saying courageous leaders, because I spend a lot of time sharing life with Scarlett. I've just shared out the school counselor Charlotte's work, Charlotte's book, and the work to try and get the parents going. And then there's a part of me that's trying to figure out where I could put myself in a leadership role to be as courageous as you're all speaking. And I just have to tell you that your book is very inspirational, and the fact that we can have a vision 500 years from now, but it's what we do every day that will make that vision a reality. And as usual, to all the women in the book club and now the man, it's my life is better because of the reading, and I really do reflective practice and try and figure out how to make it real. So Scarlett, I'll be sending you some more updates on what we're doing in Sunbury, thanks to you.
Thank you. You are an honorary ambassador. Someday you should probably just become an ambassador. We appreciate you.
Really are. We love you, Anna.
Absolutely. Barbara, did you want to say anything? So good to see you. We're happy to have you here.
Oh, you're on mute. Oh, there you are.
I'm happy to be here too. I'm very thankful and grateful that you have this book club, and the books are just wonderful.
Well, wonderful. We're so happy to have you here. And Allegra, thank you so much for spending the evening with us. It's been wonderful. We love you so much. And you are part of the Choose Love family forever. Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. You're in my heart and my writing and my imagination. You're constant companions and constant examples, because I can share what you're doing with other people and it changes them. So thank you.
Well, your writings have changed us. This is one, it's so breathtaking. Love it all.
I put a review on Amazon too. So
I can review it on Amazon. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
All right. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Join us next time at the end of May. We'll have another great author, but Allegra, we love you so much. Thank you.
Oh, bless
Love you, Allegra.
Love you too. Thank you so much.
Allegra,